Welcome to Grandma's Tales audiobook. Today we have a beautiful bedtime story for toddlers, filled with gentle magic and very quiet adventures. Are you snuggled up comfortably in your bed? Good. Have you ever wondered what the world looks like to someone who is no taller than a single thumb? Today, we will discover that even the smallest heart can hold the greatest warmth. This story will lead us down a very quiet, slow-moving river into a cozy underground home, and eventually to the safest, most peaceful garden in the whole world, where sleep comes easily and dreams are always sweet. Let's take a deep breath together. In and out. Our story begins a very long time ago, in a quiet, cozy cottage. In this cottage lived a kind woman who wished more than anything in the world to have a child of her own. But she could not. One day, a gentle fairy appeared at her door. Without saying much, the fairy handed the woman a single magical seed. "Plant this in rich earth," the fairy promised softly, "and a wonderful miracle will bloom." The woman planted the magical seed in a beautiful ceramic pot filled with rich, dark earth. She watered it carefully. Almost immediately, a magnificent flower began to grow. It had large, tightly closed petals that were a stunning shade of soft, glowing red, mixed with gentle gold. It looked very much like a tulip, but it glowed softly in the twilight. "What a beautiful, beautiful flower," the woman whispered. She leaned down and very gently kissed the soft, folded petals. The moment her lips touched the flower, there was a quiet, musical pop, like a bubble gently bursting. The heavy petals slowly unfolded, one by one. And there, sitting perfectly in the very center of the flower, on a soft bed of golden pollen, was a tiny, delicate girl. The woman's heart filled with absolute joy. The promised miracle had arrived. Because the girl was no bigger than the woman's thumb, the mother lovingly named her Thumbelina. Thumbelina was a remarkably cheerful and gentle child. Her bed was a beautifully polished walnut shell. Her mattress was made of soft blue violet leaves, and her blanket was a single, perfect pink rose petal. Before she went to sleep on her very first night, her kind mother sang her a beautiful, slow lullaby. "No matter where you go, my sweet girl," the mother whispered, gently stroking Thumbelina's hair, "my love will always wrap around you like a warm blanket. You are never alone." Thumbelina closed her eyes, feeling incredibly safe and deeply loved. During the days, Thumbelina played on the wide window ledge. The mother had placed a large, shallow bowl of water there, surrounded by a wreath of sweet-smelling flowers. Thumbelina would sit on a large green tulip leaf, using 2 white horsehairs as oars, gently rowing from one side of the bowl to the other. She sang quietly as she rowed, her voice as soft and sweet as a silver bell ringing in the distance. One quiet evening, when the moon was large and round, Thumbelina was fast asleep in her walnut shell bed. The window had been left open just a tiny crack to let in the cool, fresh night air. A warm, gentle summer breeze drifted into the room. It swirled around the window ledge, carefully picked up the polished walnut shell with the sleeping girl inside, and carried it softly out into the garden. The breeze was incredibly gentle. It did not wake her. It carried the little walnut shell over the tall grass, over the sleeping daisies, and gently set it down onto a large, flat lily pad floating on the slow, winding garden river. When Thumbelina finally opened her eyes, the morning sun was stretching its golden rays across the water. She sat up and looked around. She wasn't afraid. She thought of her mother's gentle lullaby, and a feeling of warm, comforting safety spread through her chest. The river was beautiful. It moved so slowly that it looked like a giant ribbon of smooth green glass. Tiny silver fish swam lazily beneath her lily pad. They peeked up at her with friendly round eyes, blowing tiny bubbles that popped softly on the surface. "Good morning," Thumbelina whispered to them. The fish swished their tails happily and swam away into the cool, dark green depths. Thumbelina decided to let the gentle current carry her down the river. She sat comfortably on the edge of her lily pad, trailing her tiny fingers in the cool water. Beautiful white water lilies bowed their heads as she passed by, as if saying hello. A large, polite blue butterfly fluttered down and landed softly on the edge of her leaf. The butterfly did not speak, but he slowly opened and closed his magnificent wings, keeping Thumbelina company as she drifted. The world was so big, and she was so small, but everything felt incredibly safe and wonderfully peaceful. The air smelled of fresh water and blooming reeds. However, as the days slowly turned into weeks, the warm summer air began to change. The green leaves on the trees along the riverbank started to turn beautiful shades of orange, gold, and deep red. The gentle breeze turned into a crisp, cool wind. Thumbelina pulled her pink rose-petal blanket a little tighter around her shoulders. She knew she had to find a warm, safe place before the great silver frost arrived. The great silver frost was a special time of year when the entire valley would be covered in a sparkling, icy blanket, and all the animals went to sleep. The wise old frogs had croaked that the frost would arrive exactly when the moon was completely full, and that was only 3 nights away. The clock was ticking, but softly. Thumbelina closed her eyes for a moment and thought of her mother's warm smile. The loving memory spread through her tiny fingers, chasing away the chill and reminding her to stay calm. She steered her lily pad gently towards the muddy bank, using a long piece of dry grass. She stepped off the leaf and began to walk slowly through the towering forest of tall, golden wheat stalks left over from the harvest. After a short, peaceful walk, she found a small, perfectly round hole hidden beneath a heavy, dry leaf. It was the door to the field mouse's home. Thumbelina knocked gently on the wooden door frame. The door was opened by an older, very kind-looking field mouse wearing a soft grey apron. The mouse's home was incredibly cosy. It smelled beautifully of toasted grain, dried berries, and warm earth. "Oh, you poor tiny dear," the field mouse said softly. Come in, come in. The great silver frost is almost here. You must stay with me in my warm burrow. I have plenty of grain, and my home is safe and quiet." Thumbelina was overjoyed. She thanked the kind mouse and stepped into the warm burrow. The home was a maze of smooth, round tunnels. The main room had a soft rug made of woven grass and a tiny, crackling fireplace that cast a sleepy orange glow on the earthen walls. Thumbelina was very helpful. She swept the floor with a tiny broom made of pine needles and told the field mouse beautiful stories about the sun and the river. In return, the field mouse gave her a comfortable bed made of soft dandelion fluff. One evening, the field mouse invited her neighbour over for a cup of warm berry tea. The neighbour was Mr. Mole. He was a very quiet, gentle fellow who wore a coat of the softest, thickest black velvet. Mr. Mole didn't see very well, and he didn't like the bright sun, but he was a very wise scholar. Mr. Mole has the most beautiful underground library in the world, the field mouse whispered to Thumbelina. Mr. Mole spoke in a low, rumbling voice that sounded like distant thunder rolling over soft hills. He was very impressed by Thumbelina's sweet, quiet voice. He invited them to take a walk through his long, underground hallways to see his collection of glowing crystals. Thumbelina walked carefully behind the field mouse and Mr. Mole. Mr. Mole carried a piece of glowing, safe, phosphorus wood to light their way. The tunnels were wide and smooth, perfectly silent, and smelled of cool, rich soil. As they walked, Thumbelina noticed something soft lying in the corner of a quiet tunnel. It was a beautiful bird, a swallow with long, elegant wings folded tightly against its sides. The bird's eyes were closed, and it was perfectly still. The poor creature flew down here to rest from the cold, but it has fallen into a very deep winter sleep, Mr. Mole said gently. It is safe here from the snow, but it is very, very cold and incredibly weak. Thumbelina felt a deep surge of kindness in her small heart. She knew that healing does not happen by magic. It takes time, patience, and a lot of gentle care. She stepped closer to the sleeping bird. The swallow was so much bigger than her, but she wasn't afraid. She took off her woven pink rose petal blanket and carefully tucked it around the bird's cold shoulders. Every single day of that long, quiet winter, Thumbelina came to visit the swallow. She brought a tiny acorn cup filled with warm, nourishing broth, made from toasted seeds provided by the kind field mouse. Very carefully, she would feed the sleeping bird, drop by drop, making sure it had enough strength to rest. She would sit beside the swallow for hours. She gently changed the soft, dry moss around its nest to keep the bird comfortable and clean. In the quiet, dim light of the tunnel, she would open a tiny book borrowed from Mr. Mole's library and read beautiful, slow stories about the spring sun and blooming flowers. Her soft voice filled the dark tunnel with warmth and hope. Healing did not happen overnight. It took many quiet days and long, peaceful nights. But Thumbelina never rushed, and she never gave up. She knew that true kindness meant being patient. Finally, after weeks of gentle, steady care, the bird slowly opened one dark, shiny eye. It looked at the tiny girl with immense gratitude. "Thank you, sweet little one," the swallow chirped very weakly. "Your warm soup and your beautiful stories have saved me. I will rest here just a little longer until I am strong enough to fly again." All winter long, while the great silver frost covered the world above in a thick, heavy blanket of white snow, Thumbelina secretly visited the swallow. She brought him fresh water in a tiny flower cup and seeds from the field mouse's store. The underground burrow remained perfectly quiet, safe, and deeply peaceful. Finally, the heavy snow began to melt. The air above ground turned sweet and warm. Spring had arrived in the valley. The swallow was fully rested, strong, and ready to fly again. "I am flying to the warm lands in the south, where the sun always shines and the flowers are always blooming," the swallow said, spreading his magnificent glossy wings. "Would you like to come with me, Thumbelina? You can sit on my back. I will carry you far away from the dark tunnels into the beautiful light." Thumbelina said a polite and grateful goodbye to the kind field mouse and the quiet Mr. Mole. Then she climbed onto the swallow's back, tying her silken belt gently around one of his softest feathers to stay safe. The swallow flew out of the tunnel and up into the bright blue sky. It was a breathtaking journey. They flew over towering green mountains capped with white snow, over deep blue oceans that sparkled like diamonds, and over vast forests of ancient whispering trees. The wind was warm and smelled of exotic spices and blooming jasmine. Thumbelina felt entirely free and perfectly safe. Finally, they arrived in the southern lands. It was the most beautiful place Thumbelina had ever seen. The sky was a constant soft shade of twilight purple. Huge, glowing white marble pillars stood among lush green vines. Large, brilliant flowers grew everywhere, releasing the most wonderful, calming perfumes into the air. The swallow flew down and gently placed Thumbelina on a wide, soft, pure white petal of a giant lotus flower. As Thumbelina stepped into the center of the flower, she realized she was not alone. Sitting right there was a young man, just as tiny and delicate as she was. He wore a crown of pure crystal and had a pair of beautiful translucent wings on his back. He was the prince of the flower fairies. He looked at Thumbelina with a kind, welcoming smile. He wasn't scary or demanding. He simply saw a brave, kind friend who had travelled a very long way. "Welcome to the land of eternal spring," the prince said softly. "You have such a kind heart, I can feel it." Thumbelina smiled, thinking once more of her mother's endless love. It had kept her brave and warm all this time. She had found a place where she truly belonged, surrounded by friends who were just her size. She realized that no matter how small you are, if your heart is full of kindness and you share your warmth with others, you will always find a beautiful, safe home in this vast world. The flower fairies gave her a pair of her own shimmering wings, so she could fly peacefully from flower to flower. And there, in the quiet, fragrant gardens of the south, she lived happily, surrounded by gentle breezes and the soothing hum of nature, resting every night under a canopy of bright, unmoving stars. The end. Good night, my darlings. Sleep tight, rest your little heads, and have the most beautiful, magical dreams. For more deeply relaxing audiobooks for preschoolers or 3-year-olds, stay right here on our channel, Grandma's Tales Audiobook. We have so many more wonderful adventures waiting just for you.